this is part of the celebrations that are taking place this year for the 175th anniversary of New College, which was founded in 1846. But our focus today is going to be especially on the place of world Christianity studies in New College and on the history of the centre, what is now called the Centre for the Study of World Christianity. Many of you joining us today will know it as the Centre for the Study of Christianity in the Non-Western World. I found that a little bit of a mouthful when I arrived in 2009, so the first thing I did was to change it to Centre for the Study of World Christianity. And it really is a great pleasure to have 4 distinguished former students of the centre join us today. And I'm going to give just a very, very brief historical survey of world Christianity studies at Edinburgh, and then each of our speakers will talk for about 6 minutes about their own experience of life in the centre and how it has prepared them for the career and ministry they've had subsequently. And there should be plenty of time for questions at the end. Well, the study at New College of what we now call world Christianity goes back a lot further than the coming of the centre to Edinburgh, which was in 1987. It has a long, but if we're honest, perhaps a rather up and down history. If we go back to 1867, the first Scottish Presbyterian missionary to India, Alexander Duff, was appointed to a chair of what was called evangelistic theology at New College, which was then a seminary of the Free Church of Scotland, was not part of the University of Edinburgh. And Duff's post was the first academic teaching post in a subject closely related to the mission of the church anywhere in the globe. And he held that post until his death in 1878. His lectures, we're told, appear to have been extremely practical but extremely dull. They received the thumbs down from New College students. They didn't have formal student evaluation of lectures in those days. But the report is they didn't go down too well. His successor was a man called Thomas Smith, who was appointed in 1880 to succeed Duff. But I'm afraid he was no more successful as a teacher, and he resigned after 2 years. And that chair of evangelistic theology lapsed entirely in 1909. So it wasn't the most promising of starts to the study of the subject here at New College. Well, 1 year later, in 1910, of course, New College witnessed the World Missionary Conference gathering in the Assembly Hall of what was then the United Free Church of Scotland next door. And as part of the World Missionary Conference, the Senatus of New College gave a dinner to 100 conference delegates in the Rainy Hall, familiar to most of us. And one of them was the only Korean delegate, the Methodist aristocrat and politician, Yun Chi-ho. And Yun Chi-ho describes how the principal of New College at the time, Alexander White, gave a speech which didn't impress him very much. He says he wasted nearly an hour in eulogizing the achievements of the Anglo-Saxon nations, England and America. Well, in the long term, I think the evidence suggests that the conference didn't really do that much to raise enthusiasm in the Scottish churches for mission, let alone non-Western understandings of Christianity. So however wonderful the World Missionary Conference was, it had limited impact in the Scottish churches. Then we can move fast forward another century to September 1958, when a young Presbyterian minister from central Kenya arrived in Edinburgh as an intern with the Church of Scotland. His name was John Gatu, and he decided to enroll in some classes in New College. And there was one other African studying at New College at the time, and he was from Ghana, the first independent nation of sub-Saharan Africa. And in his autobiography, Gatu recalls the responses they encountered among the New College students. I quote, Gatu says, "I was surprised that although it was obvious the fortunes of Africa had changed and she was at the dawn of independence, the Scots did not seem to know much or care about Africa. It did not seem to matter that Ghana had attained independence. In fact, I am not sure that they knew there was a country called Ghana. I was surprised that no one asked me whether I was a Mau Mau or showed the slightest interest in the freedom movement in Kenya. The only region in Africa that seemed to attract their fancy was Southern Africa. They were preoccupied with the debate on the Central African Federation, made up of Nyasaland, Malawi, Northern Rhodesia, Zambia, and Southern Rhodesia, Zimbabwe." Well, in 1958 then, the interests of New College students in Africa was, let's put it like this, patchy. Let's move on another 28 years to 1986, when New College and the University of Edinburgh agreed to give space first to Professor Andrew Walls, a migrating pilgrim from the University of Aberdeen, and a year later to the centre that he'd established, the Centre for the Study of Christianity in the Non-Western World, which had been founded in 1982. And in view of the rather uneven history I've outlined, it was probably a bold move on the part of Professor Walls, but the rest, as they say, is history. The centre put down roots, and under Professor Walls' leadership, it grew and grew some more. And the four former students of the centre, whom we are privileged to have with us today, are going to give us some idea of the impact of the centre on their own lives, maybe on the world church and on the study of world Christianity. And our first participant, Dr Jooseop Keum, was both a master's and a doctoral student in world Christianity from 1999. You will have seen from his biographical details that he's had a very influential career in the ecumenical movement and theological education. From 2007 to 2018, he was director of the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism of the World Council of Churches. He stayed up very late into the early hours of the morning to be with us, so that's why I put him on first. So welcome, Jooseup, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Brian Stanley. I have given two topics to speak 6 minutes. The first one is the most stimulating aspect at the center and the New College for my theological formation and career. I would like to say 3 words: freedom, creativity, and the world. Freedom, it sounds like Mel Gibson's yelling in Braveheart, isn't it? Whenever I try to talk about my own theology in Korea, my teacher used to tell me that you must learn the mainline Western theology first. And then when you reach to the level of critiquing it, you may go to contextual ways. I had 2 questions in my mind. Why should I read Karl Barth first, although I am very much interested in Kosuke Koyama? Is church dogmatics relevant to my Korean and Asian context? This tension between my Korean teacher and myself repeated when I was applying for the postgraduate study at the center, my teacher disagreed to study at Thomas Chalmers' house, which means the location of the center in my day. And he insists that I must study at New College. Indeed, my teacher, he had a very strange dichotomy, as many students used to have during those days. He said there is less academic and contextual approach at the center. He studied at the New College. And therefore, I wanted to check it by myself. While I was attending in an ecumenical meeting in London, I took a Flying Scotsman and I visited Professor David Kerr. He was director of the center by that time. And his first question to me was, Jooseop, could you tell me a bit of your theological understanding? Indeed, it was the first question I received to speak about my own theology during my formation days. And then we exchanged our views on Asian religions for 3 hours. Since that moment, I'm really proud of that I studied at the center. The center has valued our contextual issues and non-Western theological themes. It has trained us to advance in high-quality scholarship in world Christianity. The freedom to develop various methodologies, to use indigenous materials, to choose topics relevant to our own people and context was like Mel Gibson's cry, freedom. This freedom has paved way for creative scholarship in the context of polycentric Christianity. The teachers I met at the center and the New College have always listened carefully and encouraged to develop my own theology and polish it, my immature theological and missiological thinking. While I work in Council for World Mission and the World Council of Churches, I dare to say my younger friends that if you wanted to read some of the most creative theology, you must go to the center. I'm still saying that. I never forget about our center seminar. The students from all 4 corners of the world brought our diverse thinking, reflections, and experience and insight and exchange it like fightings in the battlefield. From the Buddhist methodology for spiritual discipline and to the one-party political system in Uganda, there was no limits or boundaries in our topics. So I met the world and world Christianity through the seminar. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Professor Brian Stanley, because to be honest, when the name of the center was the Center for the Study of Non-Western World, although I fully understand that Professor and the words named it to ensure our independence, but still we, the student from the Global South, continued to feel that maybe we were guests. However, in the alteration of the title of the center as the Center for the Study of World Christianity, we really felt that we were the subject of this study. And the dichotomy between the New College and the Thomas Chalmers House has been disappeared. Therefore, I'm very proud of being a graduate of the center. I had regarded myself as an ecumenical activist. Therefore, I originally planned to study only 1 year of master course. Then the freedom and creativity and encounter with the world Christianity at the center made me pursue a PhD with the scholarship provided by the Council for World Mission. This made me to serve CWM as an executive secretary and later in WCC as a CWM director. Of course, the academic training I gained at the center had equipped me with the excellent preparation for my job, particularly as the editor of the International Review of Mission and the other researches I was assigned to. But equally important, the world I met at the center, as both people and their scholarship based on diverse contexts, were crucial for the success of my work in the global Christian organizations. I have to confess how much I am indebted to the support of Professor Andrew Worth in my International Review of Mission work. Can you imagine that he was my bibliography editor together with Margaret? It is simply impossible to imagine in my Confucian culture, where I came from, that a guru of mission studies serves his former student. It is unimaginable in my culture. And other teachers, we have James Cox here, also supported me in many ways to achieve my goals in the jungle of church politics. Last but not least, I would like to mention the network of center alumni. Wherever I go for my mission work, I would meet center alumni who play important roles as a church leaders or faculties in theological schools. I must say they are crowds of witness in mission studies. We would share our personal stories, news, family news, and research project, publication, and so on. Sometimes it is easy to focus about, it is easy to forget about the people around you when you only focus on your research work. But the community of center can be a lifelong friendship and significant asset for your future work. So I think the best time in my life so far was 3 years at the center, although my wife, who supported my study, would never agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jooseop, for that moving tribute, and I think it's a case that we have quite a cloud of witnesses online today responding to what you said, and I'm sure endorsing it. So thank you very much, and there'll be opportunities at the end for folk to ask you questions if you can manage to stay awake a little bit longer. Our second participant, Professor Esther Mombo, studied in the Centre from 1994 to 1998. She's currently Director of International Partnerships and Alumni Relationships at St Paul's University in Limuru in central Kenya, which is where John Gatu trained for the Presbyterian ministry. She's a very well-known African theologian and theological educator. It's wonderful to see you, Esther. Thank you so much for joining us. You're very welcome. So I hand over to you now if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Greetings, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It is evening in my own context in St. Paul's Limuru, central Kenya. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this seminar. and for asking me to share some of the experiences and how they have shaped my ministry. I came to New College in 1994 after teaching in a Bible school or a theological school for a number of years, knowing that the kind of theological education that I was engaged in had limitations in terms of the ways we approached studies and how we prepared people for a context. So I had an opportunity to study outside the country, and New College, the center, was one of those spaces. So I arrived at the center. I wasn't sure what I was going to face. It was my second time to study in Europe. I came to the center and found a community of international students. I am not sure about the other New College students, but the students at the center for me became a community. In fact, when you passed in the corridors and you are not Scottish or English, people just thought you must come from the center. You must have come to study Christianity in the non-Western world. I met many people, and it was a bubble. It was one of those communities that I enjoyed, especially most of us using the same computer lab. And so the computer lab used to be a space to talk about many, many topics. I came to learn about the world, Christianity in the computer lab, and later in the seminars that we were involved in. So New College, or the center, shaped my theology, the content, the style as an African woman theologian. New College, or the center, helped me with a different approach to the study of Christianity. Then I could see what was not right with the way that I had taught Christianity in the Bible school before I came to the center. The center helped me to have different approaches and to be proud of those approaches, especially bringing out the voices of those that had been ignored either in writing or in speaking. So my academic world was widened. My ecumenical engagements were widened because of the people that I met at the center. When I was finishing my studies and wanting to go back, I wasn't sure that I wanted to return or to stay and look for a job there, because I wasn't having a job back home waiting. So I had a postdoc studies at Woodbrook because my studies were around Quaker studies. When I returned to Kenya, I was employed at a United Theological College, an ecumenical theological college at the time. And I was very happy to start teaching. But a week later, I was appointed into an administration job. So what was I going to do with all this research? And my task was to work towards developing this United Theological College to become a fully fledged private university. I was dropped into the deep end of the ocean. With all the excitement I had about what research I was going to do, I had to keep that on the side and start working for this private university. But I want to say that the skills I had learned as I did my doctoral studies helped me in the way that I interacted with people, in the way that I did my administration, especially supporting faculty to venture into research to become well equipped in the studies. I approached my teaching, administration, and mentoring of young scholars by creating space for them to question, for them to challenge, for them to be flexible, for them to be creative, not to be stuck in the old models of approaching theology or approaching history. Among the things that the center helped me was, of course, to find my voice as an African woman and to help other African women to find their voices. Two things that I did was, of course, to join and enhance the circle of concerned African women theologians as we engaged on issues around theology and culture, reading the Bible from women's perspectives, asking questions around violence against women, and issues around interfaith relations. Those areas were significant even in the way I taught other classes at the time. I was also very supported in looking at contextual realities. And as I went back to Kenya, the issues around HIV/AIDS were very strong. There were no drugs to help people live longer. And what that meant is that you had to be talking or preparing ministers in a reality of death. Mainstreaming the studies of HIV in the university, in the classes, was another very, very strong area for me. And looking back, it is because of the flexibility that I had found in the center that helped me to have this kind of approaches, to move away from this stuck curriculum that was very Eurocentric, and to look at it from a contextual reality, because the people who are going to work were going to work in a totally different reality. The center widened my horizon such that I was able to join different commissions of the church, both national and international. And even within those commissions, as I served with this openness, these ecumenical interfaith perspectives, where it was important to have an inclusive approach, a partnership approach, and to widen the tables for others to join. So for me, the center shaped me, the center equipped me, and so my research, my teaching, and my administration were very influenced by the perspectives and the approaches that I learned at the center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. That was a clear and very moving tribute to the way in which the centre has formed your ministry and your work, on the theme especially, I think, of liberating voices that so far had been suppressed or not heard. So I'm sure we'll pick up some of those themes later. Thank you. We now move across the Atlantic to the Afro-Caribbean world, and to an era which is almost the Stanley era, so we're moving a little bit nearer the present. Dr. Janice McLean-Farrell, as she is now, was finishing her PhD on Caribbean churches in London and New York City under my predecessor, Dr. Jack Thompson, when I arrived at New College in January 2009. And after several years as colleague of another centre alumnus, Mark Gornick, at the City Seminary of New York, she's now Assistant Professor of Metro Urban Ministry and Assistant Dean of Doctoral Studies at New Brunswick Theological Seminary, which I've just discovered has the distinction of being the oldest seminary in North America. So Wonderful to see you again, Janice. You're very welcome. Over to you.
Thanks, Brian. I guess to Emma and Alex and everyone else at the center, thank you so much for the invitation to participate today. The words that came to mind, there are 4 words that came to mind when I thought about this presentation today. The first is perspective. The second is mentorship. The third is opportunity. And the fourth is love for the city. And so for perspective, the person that comes to mind is Jack Thompson. And so Jack Thompson, who died a number of years ago, was my supervisor. And one of the things that Jack did for me, so in my research, my work covered Afro-Caribbean immigrants in New York City and London, but the first chapter delved into the history of Christianity in the Caribbean, specifically in Jamaica, because that's the Christianity the immigrants took with them when they came to New York and to London. And Jack, as the historian, was very intentional in reminding me that there's always 2 sides to the story. And so as I cover history, my perspective needs to be dual. Even if my opinion or my views are fixed on one side, as a scholar and as a good scholar, I needed to engage the other perspective as well. That has been something I bring into the classroom. It's something I continue to do in my research. And it's just woven into my scholarship. The other perspective that Jack gave me was, well, I guess for those of you who are in the center this year, because of COVID, you wouldn't have the pleasure of the Kaylee that we started the academic year with. And so for myself, that first semester at New College, we had the Kaylee, and the first person I danced with was Jack Thompson. And in many ways, it kind of just blew my mind in terms of what my relationship with my supervisor, advisor would be over the next couple of years. And so that was another perspective. Jack was very approachable, very creating space for me to grow as a scholar and to come into my own. And that is something that I take with me today in my classroom, making sure that I'm creating that space for students as well. The second one is mentorship. And my other supervisor, Afe Adogame, who is now at Princeton Seminary, is someone who embodied that for me. So through Afe, I heard about different conferences, had opportunities to serve with him to organize international conferences, be it for the Edinburgh 2010 or African, a conference around African studies. So these kinds of things, I think for a doctoral student, is very important that you're in a space that creates room for you to grow in these areas, knowing that the scholarship, the presentations, the papers you need to write, the conferences you'll need to organize, you need the experience to do those things. And so from the Yale Edinburgh conferences, that's organized with Margaret and Andrew Walls and Lamin Sane and now you, Brian, the room that you give to doctoral students to participate in the process is so essential and so important. When we're in post-doctoral studies and we're needing to do these things, it's the center that provides the space for us to grow in these areas and then to have these skills to then put into practice when we are working elsewhere. So thank you for that mechanism. The third one is opportunities. And I think when we are going through the doctoral program as a student, your focus is so much on your work and what you need to do and your research, in my case, the chapters you need to write and all of those things. But one of the things that New College and the center in particular helped me to understand is that there is a whole network of support system that enables you to do that. And so one of the persons who was a part of that network is here today, Margaret. Margaret organized these coffee times every day with the Waitrose, reduced price cakes to the things that she made for us. She still tried to convert me to coffee, but I remained a tea drinker to the very end. And I still am a tea drinker, Margaret. But what I bring that up because that type of community is essential to your success. It's essential to our success. And it's, you know, being reminded even as a professor now, yes, I can do the best work in the classroom, but if we do not have from the librarians to the custodians to the vast network of support services for students, you won't succeed. You won't have access to the resources you need. You won't be registered for graduation. And so the center was very foundational for me to be reminded of that teaching is one part of the process. There are many others who contribute to your learning and your growth. And I would also name the New College Library and their staff. Because for me as a student, I worked in the New College Library for a number of years. And through that work, I ended up getting a job in Murray House Library. And as a student, as I was writing, the Murray House Library opened up a whole vast array of additional resources for me to draw on. And so because of the connection or the relationship with the New College Library, Murray House Library became accessible to me. So I would encourage even the ones who are there, pay attention to what's in the other spaces, the other libraries, the other schools that might be informative to your work. And finally, a love for the city. So I was raised in rural Jamaica and my, prior to coming to Edinburgh, my interaction with city or urban spaces was a totally hate relationship. I prefer dark, pitch black nights to sleep. I do not like a lot of noise. Country living, suburban living is more conducive to my overall being. But one of the gifts that Edinburgh gave to me, so New College is in this glorious position. And I say to people even now that Edinburgh and New College remains one of the best experiences in my life. When you stand in front of New College and you look over to the sea in the sunshine, Edinburgh is absolutely glorious. And so Edinburgh became, because it's such a walkable city, it became a place where I began to love the city. And not just as this, yes, cities are complex, they have all kinds of issues, there's all kinds of history, but for myself as someone at City Seminary of New York and now at New Brunswick, as I teach on urban ministry or metro urban ministry, it's important for me to not just teach a subject from the place of deficit, but to teach it from the place of what it means to live in these places and to desire for those places to thrive, to be spaces where everyone thrives. And so that is, by my time being at New College, that's a gift I received from the city itself, that this is a place, even with everything that is going on, this is a place to love. This is a place to live in, to be concerned about. And so for me in my teaching and in my life, because I now live in New York City of all places, the city is not just this object to study, but the city becomes the context, the city becomes my classroom, and the city becomes my living space and home. So that all shapes my pedagogy in class, how I invite students into a process of thinking about their cities and be intentional about the ministry practices they implement, but also how to love it enough to work hard for it to thrive and flourish, knowing that as the city thrives and flourishes, the residents will also thrive and flourish. So perspective, mentorship, opportunities, and a love for the city, these are all things that I've received from the center, as well as the relationships with so many from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, so much. I think our marketing department could be in touch with you later. Those helpful remarks on the wonderful context of study at New College, and I trust that Alex and Emma have taken note of the Waitrose cakes and the ceilidh as perhaps things we could consider once we get out of this pandemic, to get back to different ways of creating community. But the theme of community came out very strongly in what you said. Last but not least, we welcome Dr. Timothy Tennent, who did his PhD on Indian Christian theology at the Centre from 1995 to 1998. He spent 11 years then teaching at Gordon Conwell Seminary in Massachusetts, and then in 2009 moved to become president of Asbury Theological Seminary, the 5th largest seminary in the United States. We're really privileged to have you with us, Tim, as I know you're an exceedingly busy person, so thank you very much for creating space in your diary, and we look forward to your memories and reflections.
Thank you, Brian and Emma, and great to see all of you. And it is an honor to speak because, like I can reflect those who've spoken, my time at New College was very formative, and I look back on it, my wife and I, as 3 of the most wonderful years of our life together. I also want to reflect what's been said for me, especially from North American context, where so many doctoral programs are basically autonomous journeys, through a program. I found at New College and at the center a wonderful sense of community. Many of the themes have been spoken, I totally agree on. We had the great daily tea that Margaret Acton and others helped to facilitate. But we studied together. We had this, in those days, there was a room way up at the very top we called Wits End, where we all studied. And we talked together, worked together. It was a great time of fellowship together. The joke we had was that from there you could see the Kingdom of Fife across the Firth of Forth and see the Kingdom of Fife. And of course, we laughed and said, it's true, we could see it 3 days a year, but it was out there because of the poor Scottish weather. But we also, I want to just reflect as well on the Tuesday seminars were very formative, and the times with, of course, Andrew Walls and Lemon Sané and Call Me Betty Adco and so many others were very formative and have influenced my life so much. I had the great privilege of being mentored by Dr. Cox, Professor Cox, who's with us today, and I'm so grateful that he's able to join us and for his mentorship and his kindness to me, the many hours we spent together, as well as all I learned from him about methodology and research. So I'm just very indebted to the mentoring that took place through the center. When it comes to the impact, I want to say not just my own life obviously would not have been possible without New College, but I wanted to say in a larger sense, I think the impact of the Central and North American missiology, I think we should take a note of that. I'm rooted in the evangelical tradition. I'm a United Methodist pastor as well. And the Methodist evangelical tradition and throughout North America, evangelicalism has been widely misunderstood when it comes to how we understand dialogue with other religions. And part of my whole thesis was looking at how, in my case, a 19th century Bengali theologian, a Roman Catholic, interacted with Hinduism. And so as many of us, some from the center, began to write books and write articles about how we understood this, there gradually became a change. I really believe, I particularly cite a book by Paul Knitter in 2002 on theologies of religion, where he for the first time acknowledged that he had misunderstood the evangelical view and the breadth of evangelical views regarding interfaith with religions. And we took that as a huge step forward in how we are understood in the ways we interact kind of beyond kind of a Bardian wall against natural theology, but a real serious engagement with other religions. The other, I think, major contribution that the center has made to North American missiology is the historical theological perspective that the center brings. I think most all of the speakers actually brought that out in one way or another, but I think it's important to recognize from North America what a gift that is to the world. The North American missiology was basically grew up and was born out of, mostly from Fuller Seminary, a lot of commitment to the social science disciplines. So missiology arose out of anthropology, for example, which of course brought many wonderful insights, from Ralph Winter to, Hebert and many others, Paul Hebert. But what was often lacking was the historical theological rootage of the whole thing. And so most of my work at Gordon Conwell and now at Asbury has been along those lines. And to me, it's been really a fruit of the center, because North American missiology has definitely been impacted by the theological and historical orientation and conversation that I felt was at the heart of the center, almost unconsciously so, but was so much a part of the center's work. And finally, I wanted to say, just now being president of Asbury, part of Asbury is the E. Stanley Jones School of World Missions, which is, I think, the largest mission center, study center in North America now. And that center is, in so many ways, is shaped to look a lot like the center. And so I think that's another impact. We also have the weekly seminars. We don't send students through an autonomous journeys. They go through in community. And so there's so many things about it. The tea is not as good as it is in Edinburgh, but other than that, we try best we can to do it. But anyway, I just think that there's just a lot of ways in which the center not only has influenced our lives, our careers, which have been beyond words, but also in our context, I think have helped to shape how missiology and how world Christianity is shaped. When I was in Boston, Dana Robert and I had the privilege of co-founding a doctoral program through Gordon Conwell Boston University link. And the whole program was founded around the lines of the center in terms of historical theological studies. Of course, Dana Robert was right in that vein as I was. So I can go around the country and just say that there's just so many ways the center has had an impact on how we understand global Christianity and the impact of it. And I just want to say thank you to all of the center for what they did for me and for us. And we also learned to love Scotland. So I also got to come back in 2008 as a scholar in residence. So it was great to be back at Edinburgh for that 8-month time as well, and to write one of my books. So I have so much to be indebted for. So thank you so much for this privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, for another wonderful tribute. In fact, I think Tim was actually in the audience when I gave my lecture when I was being interviewed for the job at Edinburgh, and I didn't know that he was there, but he tells me he was there, so that's one for the record. And Tim has spoken particularly, I think, about the theme of faithful interaction with other religious traditions and the way in which the centre's mentorship of him has been so influential, not just for him, but maybe for others as well, particularly within North America.
It's less a question than just a comment to thank all the former students who took part in this, because I remember them all in certain eras in my time at the center. I particularly want to thank Janice for mentioning Jack Thompson, who was a very, very close colleague. We both came to the center in 1993, and we worked together for many years afterwards in the African Christianity Project. And when I went to religious studies, we also worked together closely on indigenous religions and the relationship between Christianity and particularly other faiths, but in this sense, African religions. So I just want to thank all the speakers, and of course, each one I had a relationship with. Tim Tennent, as he said, was one of my doctoral students, but I think he was one who actually was so motivated and going forward that the field was a little bit outside my own area. But as I said, he said he worked with John Brockington as well. And we also then had an opportunity to work on research methods and so on. But anyway, I just want to thank each of you for your participation and for highlighting these important things about the center, which was for me also a very important part of my life.
Thanks, Jim, very much for mentioning Jack, who we would love to have heard what Janice said. We have a question from Case Lee, Samoa.
My question has to do more with what you do know now, with all the career experiences that you have. What would you add to the experience of students who are studying world Christianity anywhere in the world? What one thing do you think the center can do that will be additional to all the good things that you've already said that they do?
Maybe I can say that the Korean context has been changed a lot in terms of scholarship of world Christianity now. However, occasionally you may experience same thing. Still, when we work at the Global Christian Organization, it is very difficult to say that the center of gravity of the world Christianity has really shifted to the global south. Still the center of power, money, influence, maybe scholarship is still in hands of the Western churches. It is really difficult to find a way to go through in the global Christianity to find a space to talk about our own issues in the global south. However, the way I have been trained at the center is paved the way or helped me to find how can I bring the real contextual issues as one of the most urgent and important task of the global church.
We'll move on to Esther. Any one thing you would add that you feel was perhaps a deficit which needs to be emphasized today?
I wouldn't want to say deficit. I would say that whatever was being done, community, mentorship, perspectives, horizon should be upped. But I also want to say that the sense that it was the non-Western world, and now you say it's world Christianity, that perhaps world Christianity should not always just be seen as the global south, that world Christianity is also northern, and how can then the north also be influenced by the center? Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. That was, I think, in part of the reason for changing the title. It wasn't just that it was a bit complicated to say. Yeah. Janice?
I think I would pick up on what Joseph and both Esther said that the renaming it to World Christianity reminds us that we're studying Christianity in the West and the global South. And it's recognizing that the changes that need to happen in the North in terms of power and the North continuing to be the place of power or theological knowledge and intellectual knowledge, financial knowledge, the shifts that need to happen there has a concurrent shift in the global South. And so it's being attentive to the changes that need to happen in both places so that world Christianity can truly be a place of mutuality and not just this paternalistic partnership, but true partnership that enables the church to thrive and flourish. Recognizing that the questions that the global South may ask in their context is very different from the questions you ask in the global North. And so it's the validity of those questions. And so I think for students, it's owning your story, owning the expressions that you come with, that those things are valid and valuable to the entire church.
Thank you, Janice. Tim, anything you would like to add?
I'll just say quickly, I think the need to be nimble, I think that's because of the change in global Christianity, the importance of maintaining a nimble program that is aware of what's happening globally is really important. I also want to say that when I was there, a lot of us felt like the administration of the whole of New College and how they helped understand the process and the pathway was very obtuse and at times very obscure to us. And we couldn't really get good information. A lot of people don't succeed in the journey because they don't know the process and how it's involved. And so I think our first publishing effort actually was a clandestine publication by the students at the center on how to actually go through the doctoral program and what the actual process was versus the regulations and so forth. So I do think that clarity of administration is an ongoing challenge for a program. We have so many diverse students around the world who may not always get their questions answered when they approach the New College administration.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, well, it's always a challenge, but we do our best. I have a question from Mongolia, from Eugene Chin.
My question is that, and also my feeling is that even if every one of you are speaking about the contextual and dynamic theological perspectives, which is relevant to your own context, my feeling is that you are still accustomed to say about the center. So my question is that how can we overcome such kind of a dichotomy between center and margin, even if we are speaking about the contextual theology? Because wittingly or unwittingly, we are very much accustomed to this kind of concept of center and margin.
I think we were using center in terms of the place, but I do agree that the center and margin should not be fixed spaces, that people should be allowed to move within the center and the margin and to be respected and listened to, especially the voices that have been excluded. And we do know that theological education has been a space of real exclusion of some voices. Women is one example, as I was showing.
I think it is quite a significant issue. In our recent work on mission and evangelism in the World Council of Churches, particularly through the Arusha CWME conference, we have focused on the concept of mission from the margins, because the mission from the margins seeks to counteract injustice of life and church and mission. And the mission has been understood the work of the people who are privileged, and also from the rich to the poor, and from the educated to the non-educated. But during these days, the center of gravity of Christianity basically located at the end of the world. And those people from the end of the world, they rediscover themselves as the subject of Christian mission. So it's time to listen the people on the margins who have the agency and can often see what from the center is out of view. So we need some kind of the epistemological conversion and listening carefully from the voice of mission from the margins, particularly in the context of the current populist, fascist, the political environment, and also the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to learn from the daily struggles of the people who are living in the marginal conditions. So in that sense, maybe we need a bit more and also intentional research on these at the center. When I use the name of the center, it was not a kind of dichotomy between center and margins. Center as a learning and research institute, I use this name. And also, I would like to emphasize that the emergence of the centers in the global south, for instance, Akopi Kristaller Center in Ghana and in Korea. So now the center is shifting from Edinburgh to our own context, and we are doing our research and our theology with our own people in our own context as we were working in Mongolia. So that's my comment.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a sense that when the centre first came to Edinburgh, it was a little bit on the margins of the school. And I think over time, it has been brought to the heart of the school in an exciting and creative way. And that's, I think, one of the things to be grateful for. We have a question from Victoria Turner, a current student, about the relationship of academia and church practice. So Victoria, would you like to ask your question, and possibly maybe Esther might be a good person to answer it. So go ahead, Victoria.
Wondering about that relationship between kind of the academic side of world Christianity, and we've talked about, the important historical processes and trying to understand both sides, and then also understanding that relationship with the global church and the world church and the movements that are happening and ecumenical movements and things like that.
Personally, going back from Edinburgh with this academic PhD degree, I think I was challenged by the context that I had to interpret that PhD in relation to the realities that I was working in. And those are the realities that then I had to bring into the classroom. I think sometimes if you choose to just remain academic, then it's very irrelevant. But listening to the context does challenge your academic, and you reinterpret the academic stuff in a way that your students understand, but especially those of us who are preparing them for ministry. There are ways like, how do the issues challenge the studies, but how do also the studies help you understand the issues and then realistically discuss them or realistically deal with them other than just avoiding them. So it's trying to break the dichotomy between academia and practice. And I'm saying that an academic that is not practical then is dead. Any academic should be practical to the realities of the people that one is working with, whether they are students or whether they are members of church. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I don't know if Janice or Tim would like to add to that as those teaching in seminaries.
The one thing for me that has been helpful is to see myself as a scholar in service to the church. And so that helps to break down, as Esther was saying, that dichotomy. It's how do I challenge, assist, come alongside students that as they're being equipped, they are very intentional about the theological space this is going to touch ground in, and constantly reminding them in my classes that through the assignments or the assessments that I give them, that I shouldn't say forcing them, but encouraging them to be thinking about how does this impact the church where they're serving now as pastors, or they will serve in the future.
Thank you, Janice. Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, Todd Johnson, who ran the center in Edinburgh, in Gordon Conwell, we used to have this conversation whether there is a thing called global Christianity. And we often remark that, in fact, what we have is 45,000 separate Christian movements around the world. So there is an ecclesiology that is inherently, in my mind, reflected from the global Christian movement. And that's, to me, important to remember, because sometimes in the academic world, they talk about global Christianity as if it's a separate thing out there for study, disconnected from the reality of the church on the ground, 45,000 various movements.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think there is time for one last quick question from Daniel Arn, who more, I think, are sharing of his experience. Daniel.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share very quickly. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the Center for the Study of World Christianity at University of Edinburgh. And right now I'm teaching at Golden College as the Faculty of Global Christianity. So the center really shaped and transformed my scholarship, the way of thinking, and then whatever. And then, so it was a time for the turning points of my life. And then I was privileged to be able to, the first student, PhD students of the Brian Stanley, because he has been appointed the professor at 2009. So I was the first student. And then Professor James Cox was my internal examiner at my viva. I still remember that. So he was really generous to me. That's why I could pass my PhD. And then, so right now I'm living in the Golden Canal Theological Seminary, the dormitory. So I'm just interacting with the Golden Canal Theological Seminary students. I love to share my experience at University of Edinburgh. As a result, the graduate of the Golden Canal, they apply for the PhD at the University of Edinburgh. I didn't ask them to apply for the University of Edinburgh, but instead I just naturally share my experiences there. So they are inspired. Sorry for team, I didn't encourage them to apply for Asbury Theological Seminary. I'm sorry about that. But instead they apply for a PhD at University of Edinburgh. So that's it. Thank you so much for you guys. That's it.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm sure Professor Cox would say he wasn't generous, he was just fair. So in your viva, you did well. Well, I think we need to draw to a halt there, but I want to thank all of our speakers and all of those who have contributed. It's been a wonderful occasion that probably we would never have attempted if it hadn't been for COVID. So it has actually brought several generations of those of experience of a centre together, and a number of themes have emerged that I'm sure we'll want to reflect upon for the future to ensure that we conserve those elements of community, of broadening of horizons, of deep reflection, and of affirmation of one another that have come out from our speakers. So please join me in thanking our four speakers, and we must allow Joseph to go to his sleep because it's now very early in the morning for him. So thank you all.